I'm sure everyone's heard the saying, rags to riches, before. For me, that saying is a little more literal than I expected. My whole life, I've been, well, poor. My parents were old farmers in a small city, so naturally we weren't the richest people growing up. It didn't matter because we were grateful for whatever we had once it came from honest work. That was how my parents grew me. Since my parents had me when they were old, by the time I was 18, they were too old to manage the farm, and it fell to me. I did my best to keep the farm up and running, but with it being such a small town we lived in, we weren't exactly in demand. Additionally, I hadn't realized how expensive it was to run a farm. I would have been forced to close down if it wasn't for a good Samaritan named Cindy, who donated money to our farm regularly. Thanks to Cindy, we were able to purchase some of the farming equipment we desperately needed. Despite Cindy's generosity, the business was getting slower and slower until we were barely making any profit. It didn't help when a new farm came into town. They were much more advanced than our simple farm, and could run circles around us when it came to planting and harvesting. I soon found out that the new farm belonged to a grumpy old man named William. I tried to get along with William, but he couldn't seem to stand me. He would always talk negatively about our family's farm to keep people from buying our goods. Fortunately, most people in town already knew my family and thought we were all pretty decent people. When that didn't work, William began doing horrible things to sabotage us. For a while, he would break down our fencing so that our animals would run free. I'd spend days at a time trying to round them back up, which caused production to slow down. I had to install electric fencing to get him to stop. It wasn't long before he thought of a new idea, though. He started sneaking in and screwing parts off of our machines so that we wouldn't be able to use them. The final straw for me was when our animals started getting sick all of a sudden. I just knew that William was involved somehow. I started to stay up at night to keep watch in case he came back, and just as I suspected, he came creeping in one night. William started spraying something over the plants our farm animals ate. I hopped into action, chasing him all the way down a hill with a rake, but he managed to get away. The next morning, I stormed into his farm and confronted him about what he was doing. But he denied everything. The worst part about everything was that many of our animals had gotten so sick, they didn't make it. I couldn't afford the treatment the animals needed and was forced to shut down my family's farm. I sold our equipment and the rest of the animals that we had left in order for us to survive. Things went from bad to worse when that money ran out and I went completely bankrupt. I tried going to Cindy to ask for a loan, but she refused. She told me that she had invested her money elsewhere and that she couldn't help me anywhere. Couldn't believe it. The icing on the cake was that I found out Cindy had invested with William. It made my blood boil. It wasn't fair that he could sabotage my business and get away with it. As angry as I was, nothing I could do but swallow my pride and search for a job. It wasn't easy since I needed to stay close to my parents so that I could help take care of them. Soon, I learned I wouldn't have to worry about finding a job far away, because no one would hire me. They told me to get a job on someone's farm where I was better suited. News got to William about what happened to me. He was ecstatic that he had the upper hand. What William did next shocked me. He offered me a job on his farm. The nerve! I wanted to say no, but I knew I needed the money desperately. So I worked 7 days a week doing hard labor. William was so childish. He taunted me all day long about how I was now a poor failure. He even spoke down to me in front of customers. I had never felt so low in my entire life. When I finally got my first paycheck, I was highly disappointed. He paid me less than minimum wage. How was I supposed to survive on that? Most of my money ended up going to the bank to pay my parents' mortgage, and whatever was left went to buying food. It was hard, but I was doing my best to manage. Soon enough, my mother got sick, and I had to choose between paying the mortgage or buying her medicine. Of course, I chose my mother, but because I stopped making any payments to the bank, our house was repossessed. I begged William to let us stay with him until I could get a place to rent, but he told me there was no room in his 5-bedroom where he lived alone. He said we could stay in his barn with the animals. Although it was degrading, I accepted. After just a few weeks of living on the farm, I discovered something insane. Each night, William had a secret shipment come in. At first, I paid no mind to it since I thought it was just food for the animals. One night, I decided to go digging around and snuck into the trailer that came at midnight each night. I couldn't believe what I found inside. There were several types of endangered plants. William must have been harvesting them and selling them secretly. I waited inside the trailer until William came to check out his product. The minute he opened the door, I jumped out and confronted him about his illegal activities. He knew he would be in big trouble if I were to tell the police about everything I saw. Somehow, he managed to twist things around and blackmailed me into being silent. He said that if I went to the police, he would confess and also tell them I was an accomplice to the crime. I thought about my parents and what would happen to them if I ended up in prison. I decided to keep quiet until I had a plan. A few days later, while I was out into the town running errands for William, I met a strange man who had gotten in trouble with a few men. Although I didn't want any problems, I knew I had to help. I put on a brave face and ran over to his aid. Unfortunately, both of us were beaten up. Badly. Still, the man was grateful for my help. He told me he wasn't from around here and only came on business for his boss before he ended up being robbed. He introduced himself as Jonathan and said he'd be back in town a few weeks from then to repay me for my kindness. I waited patiently for his return. When he finally came back, he did the unthinkable. He bought me and my parents a new house so that we wouldn't have to live in the barn anymore. He came into town often and we quickly became friends. He would always enjoy hearing stories about my life and helped me in any way I needed. Soon enough, he offered me a job in his hometown along with a new place to stay. That same day, I quit my job at William's farm. Before I left, I gave him a piece of my mind. I told him that the next time he saw me, I'd be 10 times better off than he was. He laughed in my face, but I didn't care. After I left and went home, I met Jonathan and my parents all packed up and ready to go. It didn't occur to me to ask where we were going until then. When Jonathan told me, I nearly fainted. Apparently, he was a royal advisor to a king in a nearby region, and he had found me a job in the king's palace. I could have never imagined I would end up anywhere so fancy. When we arrived, it was like a dream. The palace had to be sitting on at least 10 acres of land. There were fabulous statues and plants everywhere. There was even a large water fountain in the center of a wide cobblestone driveway. Security had to give us an all clear before we could even enter inside. Jonathan gave me a tour of the entire palace. When we were finished, he showed me the large room in which I'd be staying and where my parents would be staying. There, he said my mother would receive nothing but the best medical help. I was overjoyed. The only thing that was left was to meet the king. He was a kind and jolly man who was loved by his people. My job was to work alongside a chef. Since I didn't have any experience, they hired someone to train me. Soon, I was a certified chef who helped to prepare meals for the king and his royal family. My life was making a full spin. I even befriended the king's daughter, whose name was Emily. She would spend hours with me in the kitchen talking and showed me more attention than anyone else in the palace. We soon started hanging out outside of the kitchen and got to know each other really well. After a few months, I asked Emily to be my girlfriend, and she agreed. This caused many of the other men to grow jealous of me. I was the envy of the town. Whenever I'd go out with Emily on my arm, men would snicker and throw jeers about how a nobody ended up with such a beautiful woman and a princess nonetheless. Unexpectedly, one day, when Emily, Jonathan, and I went into town together, we bumped into William. He instantly began trying to belittle me in front of Emily, telling her she could do much better than a lowly farmer boy. He started digging up old stories about how I used to live in a barn, hoping Emily would be ashamed of me. To his surprise, Emily let him have it. She told him it wasn't okay to look down on the poor, no matter what his status was. She said I was a much better person than he was on the inside, and that was why I ended up living such a lavish life in a palace with a beautiful girlfriend. William was so furious he screamed at the top of his lungs, throwing a fit like a toddler. Jonathan gladly shared the story with everyone at the palace, and soon The story got into the press. William became a laughingstock. I wished the story ended there, but sadly, William wouldn't admit defeat. Somehow, he managed to devise a malicious plan to poison the king and bribed one of the chefs into helping him. I noticed that the main chef had been acting strange while making dinner. He said there was a special plate for the king, and no one else could even taste it. He wouldn't allow us to watch him make this special dish either. I told Emily about it, and she agreed that it was very suspicious. She advised her father not to eat the dish, but instead invite the chef to dinner and feed him his special dish. When the chef refused to eat the food, they had someone test it. And just as suspected, it was poison. Before the chef was thrown in prison, he was forced to give up a name of the person they put him to commit such a crime. When he finally said William, I wasn't surprised. That same day, the king had William chased down and brought in to receive his punishment. That's when the king did something unheard of. He told me that he would leave it up to me how William should be dealt with. People were shouting some of the harshest forms of punishment I had ever heard. For a second, it felt like we were back in medieval times. In the end, I decided to give him a fitting punishment. I felt bad throwing such an elderly man into prison, but I knew he needed to learn a lesson. I told the king to make him work on a farm as a poop cleaner for the rest of his life. That way, he would see what it felt like when people looked down on him. While I left William to learn his lesson, I proposed to Emily. I asked the king for her hand. A little old-fashioned, I know, but he gave us his blessing. Emily and I got married and lived a happily life together.